This podcast contains adult content and themes. For a full list of our content warnings, please see our show notes. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome, my dear travelers, to the Morbid Forest. I see you creeping out there, dear traveler. Come into the light. Care to join me by the fire for a while? Don't you love nights like this? When the trees whisper secrets held within their borders. Shall I tell you a secret of my own? Well, not mine, per se. Of a man who liked to bury his away. Let me tell you of the legend of Jakob Stanley.
Before we begin, I need you to understand that everything you are about to read is true. Everything. Regardless of what you've heard, these are the facts. Maybe you should turn on the lights, if you scare easy. There's a place not that far from here. The locals call it Clear Pond. It's an old swimming hole right off the river, but deep enough in the woods that you can't see it from any roads. It was here the homely little shack burned to the ground. The flames weren't high, but they burned hot and fast. The firefighters couldn't get through the tangled brush in time, and they just let it burn. The screams were the worst part, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Jakob Stanley was a quiet child, a local boy with local heritage. And his local heritage came with local secrets. His father and his mother met in high school. They weren't what anyone would consider a good couple. They'd fight in the middle of class, sometimes even come into blows. Teachers would intervene, and amazingly, sometimes they get smacked around too. There were many suspensions, hearings, eventual expulsions, and even a few nights in jail before they walked away from the education entirely. The two lived with Jakob's grandmother, on his mom's side, for a few months before she kicked them to the curb as well. The lack of motivation to get their life started and get out of her house wasn't the straw that broke the camel's back. In the end, she grew tired of all the fighting and bickering. And she claimed for many years there was something off about that boy, Jakob's would-be father. She wasn't wrong. His parents spent a few months living in a tent, stealing food, drinking from puddles, barely call it an existence, until one day his mother missed her period.
What do you mean you're late?
His father asked his mother.
Late for what?
I'm late for my period, you idiot.
His father stood there, beside the tent, with an open mouth wide enough to catch flies.
I'm fucking pregnant, asshole!
She shouted at him. Not exactly a fun way to be introduced to the world. Jacob's mother would eventually tell him that his father was so stupid, he thought she bled from her butt because she had bowel problems. She couldn't fathom what was so difficult about understanding a woman's anatomy. Of course, Jacob's dad didn't stick around much longer. She didn't beg him to find a job so they could care a little for Jacob once he arrived. But his father had no interest in working or being a daddy, as it were. He left in the middle of the night, just as his mom was starting to show. Eventually, she found out he'd been arrested for piddling with a little boy. She hoped the other shitheads in jail treat him real nice for that. She never heard anything about him again. Good riddance. She started telling Jacob about his father when he was still small. She never failed to remind him every so often that his dad was a terrible, terrible person. After he left, Jacob's mom went back to his grandmother's. She was humbled and humiliated at her situation, but to his grandmother's credit, she invited her back with open arms. Jacob entered the world 4 months later. His birth was routine, if not easy. Jacob's mom was out of the hospital in a few days, and his grandmother made sure he went home in a nice new pair of lion print pajamas. His grandmother also talked his mom into getting her GED so she could get a good enough job to support little Jacob. It was a struggle, but she made it happen and went on to find a decent enough job at the paper mill on the other side of town. His mom made just enough to make ends meet in a little single-wide trailer in a poor part of town. His mom was a hard worker and caught the attention of the foreman at the mill. He was smitten right away with her bright smile and cheerful attitude. Her slender, busty figure didn't hurt things either. Within a year, he moved her out of the little single-wide and into a modest downtown apartment. Jacob was almost 3. Signs were beginning to manifest. It might make for a better story if I told you the man, who eventually became Jacob's stepfather, was a drunk or an abusive wife-beating cheater. But the truth is, he loved her deeply and was a pretty good father figure to Jacob. However, he wasn't blind to the kid's odd tendencies. Jacob was 5 when he entered kindergarten. It was his first big foray into integrating into social situations. He spent the previous years with his grandmother while his mom worked or went off somewhere with his stepfather. His grandmother was kind enough, but she was absent-minded and more focused on the world around her than she was helping raise the child. Her lack of parenting skills is part of what set Jacob's mom on her eerie path of madness, although his mom was able to do a bit of course correction. At school, he was an aloof oddball that couldn't make friends. He tried, in his way, by pulling people's hair to a point of ripping it out and bringing other kids the mangled corpses of frogs and other tiny creatures. For some reason, unknown to Jacob, this didn't work. His mom and stepdad sat him down and tried to explain that he wasn't allowed to do those things. Jacob was smart and quickly learned to appease them with empty apologies and promises to change. The only real thing that changed was his ability to hide his choices. There was too much of his daddy in him. At least, that's what his mother would say behind closed doors.
I'm concerned.
She told her husband.
He is too much like his dad.
The boy will be fine.
He hugged her tight.
He's figuring all this out. His life hasn't been easy. Or yours, for that matter.
I don't know. With what they are saying at school, I just don't know.
Jacob laid on the floor, his ear pressed to the air conditioning vent cover, and he could hear every word. It didn't bother him, though. She was right. He knew it just like she did. There was too much of his daddy in him. Jacob slogged his way through school with little effort and little more to show for it. When he was in school, he wasn't well liked and was bullied by some of the other children. He was far different than they knew. Unlike his father and mother, he quickly learned that if he was quiet and not disruptive, he could coast through and not be bothered by the idiot teachers. To everyone on the outside, he seemed to be adjusting and falling into a normal, if not subpar, existence. That's exactly what he wanted. Still, Jacob didn't get along with many people and avoided conversations unless it was necessary. He was a man of few words when he did bring himself to speak with others. A nod here or there, a half smile, or frown, whatever suited him at the time. One day, to everyone's surprise, Jacob brought home a girl. He said her name was Sarah, with an H. That's what he called her every time. Sarah with an H. Every single time. He thought that she supposed it was something cute and quirky, but in reality, he did it as a way for distancing himself from her. His mother and stepfather were kind enough to the girl and welcomed her whenever she came around, which was far more often than anyone expected. The two of them would go into Jacob's room and spend time together. Jacob asked a lot of questions about her life and family. It was almost clinical in a sense that he was observing her more than getting to know her. He was deciphering and decoding her patterns, her family's history, her alone times, mentally storing and mapping out how she ticked.
Why do you ask me about all this shit?
She wondered, scrolling through her feed on her iPhone.
Every day is the same thing. Which route did I take to get here? Where are my parents right now? Why do you give a shit?
He hesitated before answering and decided to keep it simple.
I don't.
She looked up, their eyes locked for a brief second. Then she said,
Yes, you do. I kind of like it.
Then she went back to scrolling. 2 months later, she was gone. They never found her. Jacob kept up the heartbreak for a while, milking it when he needed to. When anyone asked later on, he'd just tell them it was tragic, but he's trying to move forward. He'd kindly remind them that they were only together for 4 months, and he only knew her superficially. Didn't even know her parents' names. There was truth to that. The best lies always live just beyond the truth. In high school, he scraped by with an average grade hovering somewhere in the low to mid-70s. Just enough not to fail. Jacob knew he could do better, but didn't care enough to try. GPA-wise, he was the last in his class, with only the real failures being beneath him. After high school, he was ready to get away from that place and spread his wings. He was tired of people asking him about Sarah with an H. He was tired of doing the same old song and dance, and was ready to get on with his life.
I'm looking for a job.
He blurted out one evening, the summer after graduation. His mom and stepdad locked eyes.
Out of town.
He added.
I'm ready to move on with life.
His parental figures sat in silence for a while. They'd been secretly waiting for the day when Jacob would move out. They didn't think it would be so soon.
Okay, honey.
His mom patted his hand awkwardly.
What kind of job are you hoping to get?
She asked. He hadn't thought about that. Only of leaving. His stepdad jumped in.
You know, I was at the post office the other day and I saw they were hiring statewide. That could be a good job for you, bud.
His stepdad was always calling him Bud. It made Jacob's eye twitch. But Jacob found his head was moving up and down in agreement.
It looked like you could apply online.
His stepdad added. And that's what he did. A week later, he received a phone call about an interview. 2 weeks after that, he was moving into his own single wide up the coast, half a state away. The little town was named Surfside, just south of Myrtle Beach. There, a quaint little post office right off 5th Avenue is where he found employment. This post office is the one you may have heard of. And it's where our story begins, in earnest. At work, he mostly sorted mail. A lonely job without many direct colleagues. The postal workers usually manned, or womaned, the counter, or they went out delivering the never-ending deluge of mail he'd sorted. Jacob stayed to himself. I guess he liked it better that way. But Jacob proved to be a hard worker and enjoyed his work of sorting mail. Sometimes it was tedious, but he didn't mind. It kept his stress down and let him focus his mind on other things. He spent a lot of time alone in the back mailroom, a lot of time stuck in his own head. Day after day, Jacob would pack a turkey or chicken sandwich, an applesauce, a small baggie filled with something salty, and 2 boiled eggs. Then spend hours combing through mail and packages. There was the occasional letter or box that mysteriously wound up coming open. Mostly, you'd find bills or junk mail. Once in a while, there'd be the letter to a family member or friend. Once, he found some nude pictures of a woman. Those went home with him in his lunchbox. He stole plenty of small gifts or Amazon orders, but he was sporadic enough to make it seem random. On the rare occasion, he was asked to cover the front where he would find himself having to work with the customers. Jacob, already not a people person, hated that part of the job. But for the most part, he was content with his mundane little life of going to work, locking himself in a single wide, and combing the depths of depravity online. Years slid by, and it wasn't long before Jacob Stanley was a man in his mid-20s. And unlike his father, he managed to make it that far without abandoning a child. His brown hair was beginning to thin, and the skin of his crown could be seen when he angled his head just right. Jacob would never know. But that was something he had in common with his old man. That and the strange urges to kill. It was 26 years ago, on this very day, October 14th, that the incident happened. A storm settled into the area the evening before and raged all through the night into the next day. The wind howled, the rain soaked everything, and the roads were a mess. Jacob braved the elements and made his way to the post office on 5th Avenue. Shaking off the deluge of rainwater, he made his way into the small building.
Good morning.
He blurted the standard customary greeting to his supervisor, Lucy.
Good morning, Jacob.
She replied. He took a few steps towards the back room, where he went every day, before Lucy stopped him.
Jacob, I'm going to need you out here on the floor today. Bo's neighborhood is completely flooded from the storm.
Jacob stared daggers at that woman for a split second before saying,
Sure, whatever. I'm going to put my lunch in the fridge.
While in the back room, Jacob stopped at his workstation and pocketed his favorite letter opener. The irony? It was a late birthday gift from Lucy. The day dragged on, as many workdays do. For Jacob, it felt extra tedious and exhausting dealing with other members of the human race. He checked the time on his phone often. The minutes sluggishly ticked by. The desk bell on the counter kept a constant ring signaling the next person. There was a lot of smiling, too much for Jacob, and pretending to give a shit about people. He could maintain it in short bursts, but for whatever reason, the rain brought everyone in. The post office was never dead, but lines out the door were unheard of. Even though his conversations were usually curt and short as possible, he was deteriorating by mid-afternoon and fully pissed off at the world by 4 o'clock. Only 30 more minutes, he thought, I can make it. Then, I'm gonna blow off some steam. Evil thoughts penetrated his mind. The last half hour was mercifully quiet. Jacob cleaned his station, Lucy migrated to the office in the back room, and they both leaned into the end of the day's procedures.
Last thing you need to do is mop around the entrance. When you're done, it should be time to lock up for the day.
Lucy called out from the office. Jacob did as he was told. When he finished, he rolled the mop into the back, checking the time once again. 4:29 p.m. The door opened. So close. Jacob stood in the back, out of sight by the little mob sink, hung his head and waited, listening. It sounded like a group of teenagers, laughing and being loud as hell as they usually were. There was only a moment before the little bell by his workstation rang. No doubt, one of the little bastard teens being impatient. Jacob sighed. He didn't need this.
Got that, Jacob?
Lucy stuck her head out of the office.
Yeah.
Was all he said before stepping away. There were 4 of them. 2 boys and 2 girls. Probably around 16 or 17. Jacob only briefly glanced at them as he came out from the back room. He did a double take, his breath catching in his throat. The girl with the dark hair looked eerily like Sarah with an H. But how is that possible? She was long dead and gone. He knew that. He still went to the place from time to time, deep in the woods. Ironically, he'd brought her body up the coast, not far from Surfside, so he didn't have to think about it. Since he moved, sometimes he couldn't stop thinking about it. The tallest of the boys, a lanky, pimply-faced, rat-looking boy with a mop of dirty blonde hair, was banging on the desk bell like it was the cymbals on a drum set, smashing the button over and over again. Jacob couldn't tear his eyes away from the fake Sarah. It was like he was seeing a ghost.
Hello?
The boy exclaimed, still pounding the bell's button.
Can we get some stamps, man? We got shit to mail.
Stop looking at her, you creepy asshole.
The other girl blurted out of nowhere. Jacob blinked a few times, breaking his gaze. He looked at the second girl, really seeing her for the first time. Both boys cackled a shrill laugh at Jacob, just like boys always do. Things are always funny at someone else's expense. They kept laughing, barking out annoying sounds that made Jacob's head swim. The pealing of the bell, mixed with a disgusted look on the girl's face, and the boys' roars of stupid guffawing, caused something buried deep down inside of Jacob to break. The essence of his long-gone and unknown father flooded in to fill the gap. He didn't know what was happening until it was done. It was an out-of-body experience, as if he was watching a video on his phone. Jacob's hand plunged into his left pocket, wrapping his fingers around the letter opener. In one swift motion, he buried the business end of the knife into the throat of the boy ringing the bell and pulled forward, spilling blood and gore onto the freshly mopped floor. The other 3 stood motionless. Not that it mattered. The next swing of his arm was a blur and sent the letter opener into the throat of the other boy. No more laughing from them now flashed through his mind. He tore through the cartilage and gristle with ease, and the second boy fell. By this point, the girl who called him a creepy asshole was screaming. He slashed her throat with enough force to slice it open in spite of the dullness of the knife. She reached up to stem the tide of the thick, squirting lifeblood rushing from her torn skin. It was useless. The damage done couldn't be undone. The fake Sarah with an H covered her mouth, stifling a shriek, looking at her dying friends laying in a mixed pool of their own blood.
Sarah,
Jacob whispered. He wore a mask of terror and confusion on his face. Her eyes darted back to his, looking into the tiny dark dots beneath the blood-speckled brow. She lowered her hands just enough.
Yes?
That's all she got out before Jacob thrusted the letter opener between the small gap in her hands, bearing it deep into her throat where he left it. She fell onto her knees, gasping for air, blood gushing out of her wound. Shortly after, she crumbled onto the pile of her friends' bodies. This time it was Jacob pressing the button on the desk bell. As its ring faded into oblivion, he put on a disturbed smile and said,
Next!
Lucy came out of the office when she heard the girl's screams. She witnessed Jacob plunge the letter opener into the final young woman's throat. She later said she wasn't brave enough to do anything, but would run right out the back delivery ramp's entrance of the building and keep running. She'd say she couldn't call anyone because she left her damn phone and her purse hanging on the chair in the office. The reality was, she didn't stop running until her legs gave out. By then, she was in shock and didn't recover from it for a few days. She'd say she would never shake the image of what happened to that poor girl from her mind. For months, every time she closed her eyes, she saw the look of terror on that girl's face. Jacob also ran. What else could he do? He got into his car, drove in a random direction, and tried to wipe the blood off his face, only succeeding to smear it around. After several left and right turns, he noticed a pattern.
Oh shit,
he said to the empty car. He knew exactly where he was going. Clear Pond, where he buried Sarah with an H all those years ago. Jacob abandoned the car a few miles away, in case they were already looking for him. He went on foot the rest of the way. He was grateful the rain had stopped long ago. Jacob walked through many open areas where trees were cleared, and at least one area under construction, before he found the banks of the river. His original path through thick woods had changed dramatically since he dragged the body of Sarah with an H through the area more than 5 years prior. Growth never stopped. The human desire to slash and burn anything and everything for the sake of new condos or apartment buildings would never fade. Jacob wondered if they'd ever come across the body. Anything was possible, but Clear Lake Pond was deep and the stones holding her down were heavy. Yes, pond was a bit of a misnomer. Maybe it began as a pond, but nature created something else, something more sinister. He followed the river as it wound its way around a soft bend. It wasn't long before Jacob came to the edge of the clearing where it rejoined the pine forest. He stopped, looked into the dark undergrowth, and tried to get his bearings. Everything was so different than the last time he'd come here, only 6 months before. In the end, he chose to stay on the banks of the Wakama to make his way back. Jacob knew there was a river entrance that led to trails around the clear pond. A short walk later, he was climbing his way up the raised trails, peering out over the watery burial ground of his long-dead ex-girlfriend. A peninsula jutted into the heart of the lake. At the end of it, there was an old run-down shack that looked like it had been occupied in decades. Jacob pushed the rickety door open and stepped inside. Before he could close it, he heard the sirens. Jacob sat at the wobbly table in the tiny shack, staring at the slatted walls. He shut off his phone when he left his car in fear that it could be used to track him. His mind wandered in boredom. Very few in the modern age were used to shutting down all distractions and sitting with their thoughts. Jacob wasn't an exception. Time crept by. His mind, already a strange and terrible place, couldn't be silenced. He thought about his father, At least the idolized version, seeing as how they never met. He thought of the crazy things that he may have done after he left his mother. Did his father ever find himself in a situation like this? Had he ever murdered someone? Was he a serial killer lurking in the woods, burying his victims at the bottom of a lake? Or did he get his shit together? Did he work at an office building, filing paperwork and adding data to some spreadsheet? Jacob would never know. His mind drifted back to the post office and the dead kids. He wondered if it really happened. Jacob knew his mind was broken, had known for a long time. He supposed that the sirens earlier were a good indication it wasn't all in his head. The final girl scared him. It was Sarah. She'd said so herself. Or was it in his head? He didn't know. But he felt almost certain that she said yes when he asked her name. Had he asked? He estimated at least an hour had passed since locking himself in the shack. He looked down at his watch. It was only 45 minutes since he'd left the car. 20 of that was the walk to Clear Pond. He rubbed his eyes as sleep threatened to take the place of boredom. I could sleep, he thought. What's it going to hurt? They're either coming or they aren't. His eyes drooped, head lolled, swiveling around his neck, not unlike that rat-faced, lanky boy's did just before he fell into the post office floor. He may have dozed. It was hard to tell, but he felt the strange world between wake and sleep slip in at the edges of his damaged mind. A sound. A watery slosh? A splash? Maybe. Something, though. Something was there. Jacob fought the sleep. Slipped open his eyes just a bit, and through the fuzzy light, he saw it. Her. It was Sarah with an H. But it couldn't be. She was dead twice over. Once long ago, and now again. He was sure of it. And yet, she was. It clicked home. Jacob jumped up, startled, spilling an old canister of charcoal lighter fluid down the front of his legs across the table and onto the wooden floor. In front of him, blocking the door, was Sarah with an H.
What the fuck?
He muttered in terror. The thing, Sarah, stared into his eyes, unblinking, unmoving, undead. Bruises around her neck stood in a stark contrast to her pale white dead skin. Her short, wet hair hung down, framing her face. She looked at him through the tangles of her hair as he squirmed against the slatted walls of the shack. Jacob, preoccupied with his worst nightmare, didn't hear the commotion outside. 3 hours is all it took. It was hardly dusk when they came for him. Lucy, the Surfside postmaster, was found lying in the streets sobbing by an elderly couple several blocks away from the post office, in the middle of their retirement community. They were the ones that called for help. It was only a matter of time until Jacob was brought to justice for killing the innocent teens. The closed-circuit camera in the post office showed every grisly detail of his mad encounter. He was swiftly, positively identified, and the manhunt began within the first hour after the murders. A group of trained policemen and women surrounded the old shack with the deft efficiency of an army platoon. They used dogs to track him down after the abandoned car was found. The operation was dangerous, but well-trained. The lead police officer threw a stun grenade through the window of the ancient, decrepit shack. That's where things got out of hand. Jacob was plastered to the far wall of the shack near the cracked glass of the little half window. His body trembled uncontrollably. The undead glare of the thing that was once Sarah with an H terrified him to a point of nausea. The way she just stared into him burned into every fiber of his being. His skin crawled with revulsion. His hair stood on end as if his fight or flight response chose flight. And yet, he was paralyzed, helpless against her. The window by his head shattered, sending small shards of glass into his cheek, though he didn't react. Something like a grenade flew into the room and landed on the old wooden table. Jacob had enough time to see it, yet never took his eyes from Sarah with an H. The flashbang was bright and deafening in the tiny makeshift cabin. Jacob couldn't control his reaction. He covered his face, lost his balance, and fell into the table. The spilled fluid from the charcoal lighter canister ignited from the blast in a whooshing flash, catching fire to the table, the wall, and Jacob's wet pants. He screamed as the flames danced across his legs. Sarah with an H stood, stoic in the doorway, blocking his only exit. The fire climbed up the walls of the cabin, erupting into a blazing inferno within seconds. Jacob fell to the dirt floor and tried to roll the fire into submission. The fuel didn't give up so easy.
Help me!
He shouted to the grotesque thing that was once Sarah with an H. Her only movement was a small smile, snaking its way across her lips. She stood in the doorway, hovering over his body while it burned and he shrieked. Outside, the police, poised to rush in after the stun grenade, hesitated because of the fire. After a moment, the lead cop called in the fire department. They heard the cries of Jacob Stanley as he burned alive. There are some that wondered in the years after why he didn't come out of the burning shack. They guessed he got the punishment he deserved. And maybe that's the way he saw it too. He could have saved himself, but chose not to. They would never know about Sarah with an H. Some say that you can still hear the shack crackling as it forever burns to the ground. Others hear the sound of Jacob Stanley cooking for his crimes, yelling and other unintelligible things over and over, screaming into oblivion from dusk into the early hours of the morning. Still, others have said that the undead vision of Sarah with an H pulls herself out of the murky depths of Clear Pond every October for one night to make certain that Jacob Stanley stays where he fell.
This has been a Morbid Forest production. And on this week's episode, you've heard The Legend of Jacob Stanley, written by Paul Inman, with narration by Matthew Trevino as your narrator, Ron Hyatt as Jacob's father, Paul Inman as the stepdad, Glenda Villamar as the mother, David Kurze as Jacob, Cathy Tran as Sarah, Jessica Hart as Lucy, Sean Conkling Methot as Teen 1, and Devyn Boer as Teen 2. Story editing and audio production by Naomi Richards. Our theme music this season was created by Blakmoth. Music and sound effects provided by Epidemic Sound. Interested in more work from Paul? Follow his latest writing project, available for pre-order now. I have linked it down in the show notes along with his website for you guys to follow. Follow us on X, or Twitter if you're old school, Instagram, Discord, Threads, and Blue Skies to stay up to date on all the happenings within the forest. Interested in more morsels of the forest? Then join our Patreon. As a faithful traveler, you'll receive exclusive access to early episode releases, ad-free episodes, and access to bonus content for only $3 a month. That's patreon.com/themorbidforest. Can you spare a moment to help other travelers in need? For just one review or 5 stars, you can help a fellow traveler in desperate need of a horror podcast. Ratings and reviews are the best way to find lost travelers out there. So head to your favorite podcast platform today to assist a fellow traveler in finding their path to the Morbid Forest. And with that, we'll see you next time, travelers, on the Morbid Forest.